Alright, thank you for coming. It's time to start. Grab your Cheetos, your Nachos, your Doritos, whatever you want, because today we're going to address a lot of issues regarding the freestyle line art. And we are also going to explore the Rookie Abby-chan model, especially to know what these lines and these colors mean inside the model for you using freestyle and its options. So stay tuned and let's get going. Right off the bat, I want to say that there's a lot of controversy for how 2D and 3D animations should be mixed regarding frame rate. So we're going to be exploring some of those options today. Hello and welcome to this new tutorial. Today we're going to talk about freestyle. Now, don't get me wrong, freestyle is awesome, but if you really want to push your results outside the box, what you're going to need to do is to edit your mesh and start limiting your edges. For example, if we want this hand to have the complete edge, it doesn't matter what kind of thickness we will have, we want to define an edge there. So I'm going to be clicking Alt and middle mouse button so I can get this whole loop selected. And you're going to notice on our render that this line is going to be rendered if we do Control E. With Control E we get this shortcut, and then we are going to select this option we have to mark the freestyle edge. Once it's marked, it's going to turn green, and that's the first thing you want to do with this kind of characters. And what is this good for? When you create your line set, to be understood, your group of containers to define your outlines, or rather your freestyle lines, you're going to get an option down here where it says logical OR, and then this edge mark will be unchecked. When you create these edges and you mark them for, let's say for example right here, you need them to be complete, right, all the way up until here. Control E, mark the freestyle edge, then again over here Control E, mark the freestyle edge. Okay, so now it doesn't matter what position this character will have, it will not be limited by the crease angle. We're going to talk about this in a second, but it will always draw this as an edge if you check edge mark. This is on the freestyle line set, and you can create different line sets for each part of the body. Right now I'm only using one single setup for this entire character. So bear in mind, this is slot number 1. Let's go to slot number 2, and then I'm going to press F12 to render. And sure enough, we can see that we have our edge here, and it has been limited by the minimum and maximum thickness that we have right here. So even though it is selected, I added a modifier along the stroke, calligraphy, with this minimum thickness to mix with the original line. Now, I want to put this graphic on top of the screen right now because you really need to understand how to play with these modifiers in Blender 2.9. The lines that we created back here were created, but they are kind of they are not solid in a one single stroke appearance. Why? Because we are mixing and we are also subtracting using different modifiers. Okay, I will be explaining that within graphics that you should be seeing on your screen right now. Okay, so I'm doing this section with Photoshop so you can relate to what we're going to do with the drawn style that we're looking after. So one of the first parameters that I want you to think about very clearly is the free line style thickness limit. This one right here. What it does is to create sort of a barrier or create some sort of limitation for the total amount of operations that you can do with the line. Let's think about that. The total amount of operations that you can do to a line, because after all, mixing the lines and the properties such as multiply, addition, subtraction, everything is going to be adding up to this threshold. This is like the roof, the parameter, the top parameter that it's going to limit your line. How much do you want to adjust it before reaching that top? So let's start with the original freestyle absolute thickness. So you have probably seen that here in the render properties, if you come down here to freestyle and activate this checkbox, Your freestyle passes, which are living right here. By the way, I have divided this into different windows, and one of those windows is set to the same properties over here, except that we're just working with the passes. So you may see that when you have this active, this checkbox also activates, and that is cool. But then why do we have a 1 pixel line thickness here, and why do we have another base thickness over here? It is because of this parameter that I am explaining to you, the freestyle line thickness, the freestyle line style thickness, which is a rooftop limit of, in my case, 10. I have configured my render to be at most 10 pixels wide. So we're going to use that example here. In the original freestyle absolute thickness, this is going to be represented regardless if you configure any of these things inside of the line set. So in the case that you just activate this, you're going to get no modifications on the line whatsoever, and you will only get this line thickness pixel at 1. So you may interpret this from here on as your base line. This is something that you can think of as your starting line. Okay, so you're going to start with a line of 1 pixel here, and the line style that I have for this is chaining mark. Where's this chaining factor? This chaining option, it's right here on the stroke. Let me put this right here. So freestyle line style, strokes, chaining, plane, same object. Everything else, it's off by default, and then you will come here into caps. We're going to use the default, which is this but selection. After that, you have color, the color button. We mentioned this ahead. The alpha and the thickness. This is the one that we're going to be playing with a lot. This is what we're using for our example. Right now I have the calligraphy modifier active with its influence all the way set to 1. This is how much this is going to affect the line. If you put it 0, then no influence of this modifier will affect the baseline, but we want this to affect it. Now this other parameter, orientation, it's set to 65 degrees. Why? Because we should imagine, we can imagine actually, that the brush, the way it is, that's why I'm using Photoshop. If you have this brush like that, there is no modification or no rotation at all. In order for Freestyle to create a stylized line, we need to work with this as a base. This then starts at 0 position, and if I want to switch this to a 35 position, I will get something like this. You can imagine, and Photoshop artists will relate, you can imagine then that this is a 35 degree rotated brush. If I continue further, let's go all the way to let's go to 90, so you can really get this aspect. This is a 90 degree rotation. So you can notice how my brush, it's going to get all of these rotations, it's going to get all of these angles to work within my modifier. Okay, now that you understand angles, let's go back to original freestyle absolute thickness with a base line of 1 pixel. So we have a line style using the stroke, chaining the same object, and with the caps set to but we want to multiply this, or rather we're going to mix it. If you're going to mix it, then of course mixing is not multiplying. Mixing is a kind of a multiply add operation, mathematically speaking. So it is going to be mixed. This is going to be mixing this result times this result, and it's going to look like this. Both lines are mixed in at 50-50%. So this is what you will end up if I only put the calligraphy modifier in mix mode using the original freestyle absolute line, which is what we have right here. So let me switch this off, and you can see if I press F12, you can see that it's taking the orientation at a 65 angle. Therefore, this side, the right side, is thicker and the left side is thinner. So if I go to minus 65, the inclination will be inverted. We can also invert the how this affects the line in some of the modifiers. Anyways, let's continue with the example here. Don't worry, all of this will become clearer when you see it in action. I just want you to get the grounding first. Okay, so we're getting the baseline times a modifier, and this is our result line. And I am further adding another modifier called a long stroke. But this time I'm going to set it to subtract. Now, this part is really medular. This is the epitome. This is the main principal thing that you need to learn. Why are we using math modes on modifiers? Why? In the along the stroke modifier, you have the option to create a user curve profile with a minimum value and then also a maximum value. Generally, all of the modifiers will range from 0 to 1, but you can exceed that parameter in order for you to get a better line. And the way we're going to represent this, the way we're going to imagine this right now, let's imagine for a second that this right here is your 0, okay? And this over here, it's going to be your max, which in our case is 2. And this right here, I'm sorry, this is 0, this is 1, and then we have 2. Okay, that's not a minus, that's just 2. 0, 1, and 2. Therefore, we can say the minimum value that we want for this, it's going to start at 0.078. Okay, right here. Okay, and then the maximum value, it's going to be all the way at the top, which is going to be 2. How do I decide about that? Well, let's open the modifier. You can add it here where it says modifier along the stroke, and this is all inside the thickness here, the freestyle line. If you open that, you come to thickness, you'll get the modifier empty spaces, so you can add along the stroke. So this along the stroke has the property to create a user profile curve or leave it at linear. If it's set to linear, then you're going to get only these two values, minimum and maximum, but we want to use a curve, and therefore we're going to modulate this curve in a 65 angle per se to affect our previous result. So I have my minimum value and then my maximum value here. This then in turn is subtracted because I have my mode set to subtract right here. Subtraction. Okay, it's going to subtract the result from the previous modifiers. My previous modifier line looks like this. I'm going to be subtracting this using this curve profile. So let's see what's going on. I really hope that you can grasp this concept so that you can stylize your line artwork even better. So the operation that is taking place here is that Freestyle is taking this user evaluation curve and it's going to subtract it from the previous result. I have thickened this curve so that you can see the result. Since our minimum value is 0.078, I am starting to cut my original 1 pixel base line. You remember that, right? This is a 1 pixel line. So 0.78 should be somewhere around here. Okay, imagine just for a second, 0.78, it's all this black space all the way up. Okay, so if I say 1, then this is the entire length of the width for the line. So that's what's going on here. Let's imagine for a second that we're really zooming into this line and then we're seeing this result. So what's going on is I'm taking this white value 0.078 somewhere down here, and it's going to raster, or it's going to surge all the way up until 2, because we set our profile curve to 2. That means whatever is in that range, it's going to get subtracted. Why do we want to use that? Because we want to further accentuate the angle that we decided here. Remember, we had a 65-degree angle for the calligraphy. But this line is bugging us. It's bothering us. It's obstructing our creative work. And therefore, we need some method, some kind of help to remove this and make it go like that. So we can get this all out of the way. Okay? And that is exactly why we are subtracting using this a long stroke modifier with this kind of setup. So my operation looks like this. This red dots are these red dots along the stroke of the curve. Okay, so just in case that you can picture this, this is how it would look. So the operation that we are taking place in here will give us a result line as follows. Let me select this line, let me select this one and this one, mix it all together. Let me scale it just a tad so you can really see this. And since I already set this to subtract mode, okay, I'm going to be using the blue one. So I'm getting 0.078 right here, and then I'm tracing all the way up until 2. This entire section will get removed. This entire section will get removed. Why? Because we're using this profile curve from this modifier over the original curve. So we end up with this kind of line. I really hope that this is very clear on what I am explaining, because it's really important for you to understand what's going on when you use different factors for your line. And thus we have this kind of stylized line, and I say kind of because you can create any effect that you want, so as long as you know how to manage your profile curves, if you want to customize those things. So let's activate now the curve along stroke along the curve using this button right here. So I'm going to activate it, then press F12, and sure enough, it's cutting out the exceeding lines as we saw at the beginning of the video. And everything that is not between the 0.78 or exceeding 3, because our maximum value is 2, is not being kept, and therefore the line gets represented in this way. Please play back this entire section 1, 2, and even 3 times if you must, because this is the basic of the basic. I cannot teach you anything else besides than this, because math operations on the modifiers are going to definitely help you to identify the angles, the correct angles in which you need to trace your outline. And how do we know this? Because we as artists, as 2D and 3D artists, must know what the angles of the brush do to our calligraphy, our strokes, or our lines. So it is very important you understand this concept. Alright, let's continue with the video and let's put this all into practice. The intention here is to create the first pass outline. Let me switch everything off and switch to the slot number 3. Let me switch the calligraphy and along the stroke, and let me switch off the edge marks, and also let me go to line thickness on the render settings right here, just to 1 and absolute, because relative also has its uses. So if I press F12, this is what you're going to get by default. And then you will say, oh no, freestyle is not for me, it's so ugly, I cannot bear with it. there are two things that you need to consider. Number one, the pose. When you want to represent something flat, you need to pose it flat. Number two, the camera. This camera specifically that I am using, as well as the viewport, and please take notice on this. Always work on your viewport at 80 millimeters. Please, please. Do not work at 16 millimeters like a lot of people do, because then you will get this thing like this. Some other people prefer to work on 24, on 35, and even such, they go to orthographic view. Look at this thing. Can't get any flatter than this, but this is, I don't know. Like, I prefer to just go to 80 millimeters, get out of the isometric view, and then work like this. Why is this important? Why is posing in a 2D pose important? Because if you pose like this, you could kind of get away with it, but whenever you present volume like this, then you're challenging the viewer to question whether this is going to be a 2D image, natural drawn 2D image, or a computer generated image. And to avoid that, there are a lot of tricks specifically for the line. We're not going to talk about shadows, colors, textures. We're specifically addressing the line problem. One of the first things that you need to do is to know that by default, whenever you activate Freestyle, you're going to get this kind of lines, but you need to modify them for you to work with your rendering. So right now I'm going to go back into camera view right here, and if we've already seen, this line thickness is set to 1. This is like the maximum amount of thickness that the line is going to get in the render. This is where it gets interesting. Let me go just step by step so you don't get confused with this. Let me hide this and let me open this thing rather all the way over here. Okay, so when you mark here your view layer properties, you're going to come here into the freestyle option, and this crease angle is set normally at 142 or 143, I think. And what this crease angle does is to detect the thickness that you're going to have when you're crossing over another section that is near the segment that it's drawing. In plain English, how near is the next line from the previous line. So if you're increasing your angles, then most lines are going to mix together, and the result is just these bulky lines that are not much artistic. They are not much artistic. So what we want to do is to add freestyle line set commands that tell Blender, you know what, we need to render the edges that we marked with a logical OR. That means if you get inclusive, that means whenever you detect a silhouette or a border, let's say for the helmet or this pad, shoulder pad, you're going to draw an edge. And this is done through these buttons right here. If you have visibility off, then everything is going to be drawn and nothing is going to have an outline. If you activate the selection by visibility to affect this line set, what you're going to get is the free line style itself. This is right here. Visibility allows us to have everything visible drawn with a line. Next, the edge types we just spoke about. This section right here, that's what it's good for. And here you can include or exclude your line sets. So for example, maybe we want the body to have a line but not the helmet. Then I will create an alternative line set right here, create new, and then I will add that helmet, but the options for edges, the edge types, I would select exclusive. I can also select collections to be excluded, but that's another topic for another video. So let's continue. Next we have Facemarks. Instead of just selecting your edges, you can select faces in edit mode, the filter type faces, and then you can select a whole bunch of faces. Now why is this useful? This is useful for the occasions when you have the eyebrows and the eyes all close together, and then this starts to happen. So you can select all of those faces and then assign them with face marks to not be included. So you can click here on exclusive, and they will not be considered if you create a separate free line style. Please bear in mind that this list that you're going to create right here, it's going to have a lot of intention separating objects. Okay, so the idea here is that you can organize and separate the objects. If you want one single stroke along the entire character, then go ahead to just use this single line set, but you should create new ones and name them. If I want to render the gear tactic only, then I can create a specific freestyle line set for the helmet, the gloves, the weapons, the knee pads, the shoulder pads, and also the boots. And of course, once they are separated, I can configure them to be thicker, thinner, to have a permanent stroke like constant stroke, or even change the stroke color. But we're not going to cover that. I just wanted to tell you why you should use inclusive, exclusive in either of those fields. So I'm not using Facemarks, so I'm going to switch off this button. I'm not going to be using collections, although if you switch it on, you can pick your collection to be inclusive or exclusive. In my case, I can pick the helmet if I had it in another collection, and then I would say exclusive to not take it into account. All right, so let's go into the next one. Let's switch those off. And image border, of course, you'll know that it's going to identify the line between the background and the character. So that's that. Let's go into freestyle line style. Now this is the crucial part. This is the most important part, I would say. So let's dive into this. By default, you will come here into strokes. Strokes have this weird option that says chaining. I don't know why you should chain your strokes. It's like when you draw once, twice, 3 times, and you continue to do this kind of from the previous point onto the next point. So I guess it works that way because whenever I uncheck this, check this result, this is like not optimal. See, I tried to report this, but apparently this is something that is expected on freestyle. I don't know why in the world you would expect segments like this when you do not have checked segments over here. You see this right here? You have dashed line. If this was selected, then this would be obvious, but it is not. So whenever I uncheck chaining, okay, this is what happens. So if you check chaining, what Freestyle is going to do is going to calculate the next segment and chain it. That's why you need to mark this chaining thing. And of course, you have sketchy and plain for the same object to do this on one go. We're not going to cover all of this, but basically if you're planning to do like architectural stylized render with freestyle, all of these things come really handy for the lines. Even the sorting for the camera for things that are near or far. This last section, caps. Whenever I select round, the normal expected behavior that the user expects is that the line like this, okay, it's going to have a rounded appearance. So if you select round, then that's exactly what you get in the default freestyle line. So again, if you do not touch anything else, then you get these butts rounded in the line. Okay, but I'm going to leave it just like so, because on the next section, the next button that we have right here, it's color. So it's pretty self-explanatory. And let me switch this to a red color. Let's say that you were in class, on math class, you were sleeping, and you wanted to draw the snake eyes. Well, you only had the red marker, and then you go. So now you're starting to see where the line set is useful for. Because if I separate different elements for line sets, then I can assign to each of those line sets individual colors to be painting. In that way, you can have the helmet in red color, the boots in a red color, and the rest of the suit in another color with another line set. Okay, I hope this is clear. If it's not clear, please don't forget to ask questions down here in the comment section below. I'll be happy to answer them because Blender 3 is about to arrive and we are still in the dark with some of the parameters regarding freestyle and NPR stylized animation, because I have received a lot of questions. Mr. Schiller, I need to animate. Does Freestyle support the animation feature? Yes, it does, and we're going to see how it does. But first, let's walk through these settings. I know it's a kind of a long video. I hope you really have some interesting questions to ask. Anyways, let's go to alpha, because when you draw this line, you may probably want to output the render pass for Freestyle with an alpha transparency. You don't want them probably at 100%. Maybe you want it just a slight touch so that your stylized render does not feel like an entire outline drawn, but instead an integrated part of the outline from the texture that your character has. Now that's why you want to do this and render out to a separate pass. That's why the alpha, it's important there. And you can also add modifiers along the stroke to make the alpha even have a different thickness along the line, or maybe the noise. You want to add an alpha transparency to the noise. So let's go to the most important parameter, which is thickness. Here in thickness, my base drawing has a thickness of 10. Now you'll think, wait a minute, we had a thickness of 1. Why does this parameter specifically, this setting right here for the line style, have a thickness of 10? What happens if we go to 50, Mr. Schiller? I don't know, let's see. Press F12, we get to render, and sure enough, we're getting our thickness here. But then why is this thickness parameter out here? What is this for? Okay, this took me the entire morning to figure it out. This is your continuous line. This is what we found back here when we started to see the strokes, okay? So strokes is closely related with this. That's why this parameter is useful for. There's nothing else this parameter does. And this took me a lot of time, and it was really frustrating. And if you are checking this video and you've come to this section, thank you very much for your patience, because I know Freestyle is kind of a rough diamond in the making, and we still need to break it down so that everyone can feel comfortable using this in either animations, setting your stylized lines, or using it for productions, specifically with variations on the line, which if you don't use those variations in your line, your stylized render or animation is going to look too CG. And we don't want that. What we want is more artistic freedom. So bear with me and hold with me until the end of the video, because you're going to get all of these parameters. Anyways, so thickness right here, it's determining how thick the line is going to be. So let me go back to 10, and that is the maximum parameter. Please keep this in mind. This is the maximum spendable parameter of the thickness for all of the lines that you're going to use. It's like your budget line. Let's say like that. Let's say that you want to buy a pool, water pool, okay? And that water pool costs $10, just like this, okay? So that's the total amount you're willing to spend on that water pool, including the toys, the water toys, or whatever thing you're going to use, like the scuba diving gear and stuff, that it comes with that swimming pool. But let's say that you are going to spend those limits, but let's say that now you need to add different items, okay? And those, but let's say now that you want to add different items. Those items do also come with their own thickness. Look at this. I'm going to be adding a modifier which is called Calligraphy. So if you click here, let me make this really huge, okay? Right down here where it says modifiers, you can click there, and we have different modifiers for different cases. We're not going to be visiting all of them. We only want to know what does calligraphy and a long stroke help us to do when we are going to create our stylized freestyle render. So this parameter here, thickness 10, I would recommend to you that you use it, because that's a total spendable amount of money that you can throw at this thing while you're configuring your swimming pool. Anyways, down here in calligraphy, you also have the minimum thickness and the maximum thickness from this total amount spent. So the minimum thickness 0.5 will go to maximum thickness 3. from the 10 limit that we have right here. And please remember, this works along with this. The minimum thickness for the, let's say, standard freestyle render is going to be rendered at 1. But the calligraphy is going to take from this amount, and also it's going to affect it from 0.5 to 3. Okay, that's good. Now, the settings that I'm using here, I would like you to try them, because as you can see in the following section, the difference between the orientation for your calligraphy also affects how the lines are stroked. Okay, this is important. So in my case, I found out that minus 65 degrees is the angle that I like to work with. So you'll need to find out whether it's one of these combinations: 0, 35, 90, minus 90, minus 35, and then obviously 0 again. So in my case, this is what works for me. So now I'm going to be clicking here so you can see what this does. But first, let's go back to color and switch back to black. Okay, so again, F12 for the render, and now we get our character again here. Mr. Schiller, this looks really awesome, but there are some areas that do not get like drawn like this. What do you do in that case? Please remember, we are only working in the thickness button with the modifier calligraphy. We have another one down here along the stroke, but we're going to talk about that later. And such, I have the orientation minus 65, which works for me. What it does is that the heavier strokes are driven to the right side, while the lighter strokes are driven to the left side. So that's why you see a thinner line here and a thicker line here, although this is not completed, so it is not all like really great. So what do we do when we do have a sharp cut here, but we do not see the line? We can do one of two things. We can again select with the filter selection edge, select all of those edges in which we are interested in drawing a line like this. Okay, I'm going to be picking all of these lines right here, and I can end this right here. I don't have to complete it, although if you do want to have a complete animation, maybe you should consider where your final line is going to end. Let's just say, for example, we want that. Okay, so if you press N, you can come here into item. You will see that you have this mean crease slider. If you put it all the way to 1, the line is going to turn red, and that means there is a sharp cut, a sharp edge, a sharp crease from the light. So that means the light will hit here and will reevaluate over this edge, and then reevaluate again over the next face that it's continuing from this. So right here you'll get one value, another average value, but this one right here will almost have a 0 value, or rather a crease of 1 in our case, to make this really sharp, a really sharp cut. Now let's press F12 and see if that worked. That did not work, Mr. Schiller. I don't know why you're saying all of this if nothing of this really works. No, it does work. Check it out. Now that you have marked that crease, you can come here into the crease angle to recognize this specific crease that we just created. Okay, so this is what this is good for. Now, the threshold sensibility to recognize the angles is set by this specific parameter down here in the freestyle listing. Okay, right under here in the freestyle settings, you have the crease angle. So let's increase it. This is 143. Let's go to 160 and then we see this render. Not only this section got recognized, but also a lot of other sections that we don't really want. So maybe the threshold sensitivity was too high to detect the creases. Okay, because even though these other faces are not marked as creases, it surely enough has recognized that the difference of the angles, it's with this threshold sensibility. So let's go back, I don't know, let's say 120 for a much less detailed lines and creases, and this kind of works. Okay, so Mr. Schiller, I like it like this. It's kind of clean. I guess my animation kind of look better like this, but what if I want this line anyways, but with this lower sensibility, with this lower crease angle sensibility threshold? Okay, no problemo. You come back here, and if you remember, this thing is still selected, Control E, and then mark it with a Freestyle Edge. And remember that we have on our Freestyle line set the edge type active. So all of these edge types are going to be recognized with a border, silhouette, and a logical OR. That means it's going to be added as well as an edge mark. What we did right now. Now let's press F12 again. And sure enough, we have our line there. If you're still watching this tutorial, thank you very much for your support. I hope you don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I know I have not been posting that many content lately, but I've been resting a lot and also taking care of family matters, and I really appreciate all of your support whenever you mention that all of these videos are really helpful for you. Let's go back to here. Now you can see your character is kind of clean, but the gloves are not that pretty. Let's go back to 150 and let's see how this does. For the helmet, for example. Now I can see the helmet, but I see there's a lot of items here that I don't care to draw. This part is kind of looking good. This is not too good. This is recognizing too much crease information, too many faces. So no, let's go back to 145 for the sensitivity. This thing should be your indicator for the sensibility to detect the edges. So the crease angle, in reality, in your mind, it should be called like sensitivity threshold or something like that. Okay, I think this is looking pretty good. We're going to go back like we had it before, like I think it was 143, because even the slightest change here is going to help you out. Now, Mr. Schiller, what is this face smoothness for? In the case that you have the subdivision surface for the body, and let's apply it as a matter of fact. So I have two borders here. Let's apply the modifier subdivision surface. I'm doing this for the new users because you probably don't know that Control 1 will add a subdivision 1 level to your character. So yes, that's a shortcut. If you select it and press Ctrl 1, you're going to get exactly this, the subdivision at 1 level here on your modifiers list. Okay, let's go back here. And now that this has been applied, you can see that the fingers are smoother and some of the weapons are also smoothed. Maybe we want that, maybe we don't want that. But regardless, this is kind of looking pretty good. Now, whenever you have one subdivision level, you should apply the face smoothness so that it can also detect the crease angle between the changes that we have in some of the surfaces. Press F12, and now your face smoothness plus the level 1 subdivision will allow you to see smoother lines with your animation. Now, if you prefer, you can render this out, and it's going to look just like this. Mr. Schiller, what happened? Everything just went away. Why I'm not seeing the rest of the things? And I'm even getting this jaggy lines. This is horrible, Mr. Schiller. I don't like this. Well, there are some cases where you do want to apply certain modifiers to smooth your surfaces, or maybe not. Maybe you do not want it on this case. I was experimenting with a Suzanne at level 2 subdivisions and then applying the face smoothness, and this thing really worked. But as you can see, let's uncheck face smoothness and let's put this superhero back to its original state. It's really good like this. Everything has been working just fine. Alright, Mr. Schiller, this is kind of cool. I can see that the bolder strokes are on this side and the thinner strokes are on this side. That means that for every right side that I have on the drawing, like this, I have a thick, bold stroke, but not here. Here it's thin, very thin. So how do we further stylize this some more? I'm glad you asked, because we have on the free line style different modifiers that we can apply to the line thickness. This is a button, so I'm pressing here. Let me open this so you can see it. Thickness. The add modifier that we have used is the Calligraphy. This is the one that we have right here. And right now it's working on a mix mode. Now you can understand why this thing out here it's important, because when it traces your original freestyle first pass, as we can say it, the additional modifiers have a blending mode so that it can multiply, divide, have a minimum or a maximum compared to the original line, or even subtract it or add it. That means that if you have a thick line in 1 pixel, if you create a calligraphy and then you say that you want to add whatever this influence from this modifier is going to create, it's going to be added on top of this. So if we're going to affect this with a maximum thickness of 3 over on top the line thickness of 1, we're effectively kind of getting 4 pixels in return for some areas and 0.5 pixels on some of the other thinner areas. But since we have 1 right here, then 0.5 is not that much noticeable on the continuous line, but it will be noticeable, for example, here, where this does not reach, but it does reach because of the calligraphy modifier. Okay, this is just test and trial. Just remember to be patient and try as many settings as you want. But basically, I'm going to be leaving a link so you can check all of these details and download this picture so you can see the settings. And next, I'm going to be adding a modifier along the stroke, because I want to represent the principle that we've talked about, which is that we can subtract from the original baseline or freestyle base, we can call it that way, and then we can add a along stroke modifier in subtract mode. Why do I want to do this? Because I can switch from linear, okay, which has a minimum and a maximum value, and I can have it set to curve, which basically will say to this render, you know what, take this minimum value and add it whatever you find lines, add it a maximum of 2 in thickness. But in the transition, we don't want it to be linear. No, what we want is to be thinner, and then all of a sudden a jump to a thicker line. That's why you're going to see some changes right here. I'm going to be switching to slot number 4 in this case, and we're going to render. And right now, what that along stroke modifier is doing is detecting the previous calligraphy settings that we said. They are going to be mixed with the main line of the freestyle, and then once the along the stroke finds the line, it's going to subtract from a thinner to a thicker line, and then we get this kind of results. Okay, bold go into thin. And to compare this, I'm going to be switching with J, Alt J, to go back, Alt J, 3, J, 4, Alt J, this is the previous, J, this is the current. Notice how some of the lines disappear. So around the chest, for example, we have a nice line, but if we do the subtract method with along the stroke, then that line is subtracted and it's not there anymore. Depending on the art style that you want, you may want to have those things there, or you may not. Again, you can come up here to the freestyle main header and then change the sensibility. I'm going to be switching it to 138. Even as much as 2 degrees, they do count in cleaning up some areas. Now, definitely, the modeling is very important here for you to work with this kind of things. Like, for example, here, this is really messy, but it is part of the model that we have right here. So bear in mind that whenever you're modeling something, bear in mind how you do the modeling, otherwise it will affect your render. Now this is a human body that has human proportions, but if you were to create stylized animation and exaggerations, freestyle with this kind of combinations, it's going to help you a lot, and I really hope that you put this to good use, because it was time to address all of this together. I'm just swiping by this. There is a lot to talk about freestyle and stylization for animation, exaggeration, the rigs, the modeling, the vertex colors. There's a lot of topic to cover, so don't worry about that. If you are not subscribed to my channel or to my Patreon, then please do it, so because you can ask all of those questions directly here in the comment section below or in Patreon if you are subscribed with that channel as well. And the advantage is that you can get the files and you can also get more in-depth videos about this. Alright, so let's finish this up. I'm going to be activating this because on the previous two renders we did not have this active, although we saw some differences. That was kind of funny. So now we're seeing the differences, as I was mentioning before, because it's subtracting. Now you can invert this curve and the opposite will be truth. Instead of having a bold line here, we're going to invert that and it's going to be subtracted from the calligraphy in this mode. Okay, so I'm going to click here, invert, and now the curve, it's internally going to be going this way. Okay, so it's flipped. Let's see how it turns out. Let's go to slot number 5, press F12, and sure enough, I really like this one. This one is looking much better. Look at this. So maybe not 138, maybe 137. F12. I just want to get rid of this thing, but it's looking pretty awesome. Just like that, it's looking pretty awesome. Now imagine if we were to create line sets so that the helmet will be not a total dark color but kind of a gray color, and some of the other parts will have different outlines. So that's cool. Okay, but I think it's just too thin. Let's try something else. Now remember, this is your total budget. You cannot spend more than you have determined here. So that goes in combination with whatever base you have down here. So anything between 1 and 10 could be spent or used between these modifiers. This one, for example, uses 3, and this one is going to subtract 2 from that 3 because we have set the operation to subtract. Okay, no, that's too much. Maybe what we want to do is to put this 0.78, and maybe the max value to subtract will be just let's see, 1.2. Let's go with that. Whoops, I override the previous render, so there's no way for us to compare. JJ on 4. Here we go. So the render that we did right now is this one, and the previous one is this one. So you can already see the difference. There's a huge difference with only switching those numbers. Well, let's call these spendable numbers. We're going to spend from this total of 10 in thickness. Now it doesn't matter if you put here a higher number. Let's go for 20. Let's go to slot number 6 and render out. It doesn't matter because now you have a conditions that are driven by the modifiers. That's why they are called modifiers. They are spending this. But if you were to switch this off, guess what? The only thing that you're going to be using is this one plus the baseline thickness. I hope this is not getting confused. This is not getting you confused because it's really the most feasible way to break it down. If you're starting to use freestyle. Anyways, let's go back to 10 total amount. Let's activate this one, and then finally F12. Let's render it out, and yeah, sure enough, here we have it. Look at that, perfect. Now my bolder strokes are on this side, and on the other side, on the left side of the drawing, there are thinner borders. Okay, this kind of looks good. Maybe we don't want the line too thin, and you can move and manipulate that over here. I'm going to go back to 2, and in calligraphy I'm going to set the maximum thickness of 4. Let's see how we do with that. And by the way, this minus 65, like I mentioned before, you can check it out on the previous part of this same video, how it is best for you to orient your threshold. So I'm going to go back into the slot number 7, and we're about to finish with this, and I'm going to set it to 0. Now you're going to see a huge change. See that? All of the lines are now being drawn with a thicker threshold, if we can say it so, from down to top. Okay, from the bottom to the top. And how do we know this? Because if we go Alt J, you can see the direction of the lines changed. So we can appreciate more thicker lines on the right side of the drawing and more thinner lines on the left side of the drawing. But if we go to the next render, then we can see the thicker lines are on the base and the thinner lines are on the top. Look at that. Mr. Schiller, I want my thicker lines to go from the left and my thinner lines go to the right. Alright, okay, no problemo. What we're going to do now is to switch that over here on the calligraphy. You can see that the orientation is 0 because it's neutral. Okay, neutral, that means it's the default position, it's a default kind of method from the bottom to the top. But if you want the left side to be thicker and the right side to be thinner, let's not forget that we had previously, I think it was minus 65. This was on the previous render. But if we want the inverted, we need to only place 65. And let's see how it does. This is our last render, and I think we are going to finish the video right here. So there you go. Thinner lines over this side. Whoops. No, I'm sorry. We wanted to do the contrary. This is so cool. Minus 65. Minus 65. And render again. Okay, so this is kind of what we're looking for. It is not much that noticeable, but maybe here on the helmet you can see it. Okay, so this right side is kind of thicker, and over here we have more thinner lines. So we're back into minus 65 because remember we had along the stroke having cuts, or rather subtracting in an inverted way. So let's leave this as it was before. So right now it should work all perfectly. Okay. $65, and let's see how it does. Yep, there we go. Now we have thicker lines on the left and thinner lines on the right. Thicker, thinner, thicker, thinner, thicker, thinner. The difference is subtle, but this will help you also to separate your line arts with different orientations using the calligraphy and subtracting probably along the stroke. Now, why do I use these two together in 293? I used to use only along the stroke with this kind of curve specifically to address a thick and thin line, but for some strange reason on 293 this is not working like it used to. So I found out through trial and error that calligraphy will give you the thicker line, but then you will take along the stroke to subtract the exceeding tint, or the exceeding ink, I'm sorry. And you can also tint it. F12, and as you can see, that's the difference. So combining these two things, it's really powerful. So I'm going to be sharing this setup. It's not really that complex. And now I'm going to be rendering this, and I'll see you in a while after the render is finished. Now, please, before you go, before you click away, before you even think to switch the video, please consider the following. whenever you're creating a 3D character and you're in this exact state where you can see your model outline and you can see your model material reminiscing a 2D flat image, you are pretty much 50% done when you're stylizing your character. Why is this? Or your materials or your shaders. Why is this? Because we as humans tend to recognize flat shading with just this kind of contrast with an outline. What I mean is that whenever you have volume but looks flat like this, you're getting the viewer to convey his perception that this is a 2D work. Yeah, Mr. Shooter, but the lines are too perfect, and you said that we need to wiggle the lines, probably that we need to make some noise. Sure enough, let's retract this and let's add a noise to the line. Now, the question here is, where do you want to add the noise? You want to add it on the calligraphy and then subtract from along the stroke, or do you want the end operation from the calligraphy, subtract by the along the stroke modifier, and then add the noise? So placing the modifiers is very important as well. So you can put this up using this arrow, okay, or this other arrow to make it go down. In my case, I'm going to be deciding that the noise is going to be set between the calligraphy and along the stroke, and let's see how that goes. And again, this is going to be our last render because we are running out of slots. F12, and this is mayhem, this is chaos, this is too much. It's because we're using the mix, and it's because we're spending remember, we have this limit to spend in our swimming pool of 10 in thickness, and we're using an amplitude of 10, so it's just too much. It's basically taking all the budget and leaving all of the other lines or the other modifiers without budgets. The items on the pools are gone. So no, we don't want that much of the amplitude. We want probably around 1.5. I guess it's still too much. And you can also variate the seed. Let's see how it does. And I think I'm probably wanting to multiply rather what we have right here, because it looks too jaggy. It kind of looks good, you know. There is this wiggly thing going on. It's kind of good, but this is a very unpleasant thing to watch if this was animation. So let's do something even less. The period means the frequency, how much frequent you want this jagginess to appear. So let's do something. I'm going to go back into the amplitude of 10. Let's suspend everything back again. Let's press F12. We're going to get all of those nasty lines, but we want to make them more continuous, okay? And for that we need to go to period. If I'm going to set this period to 0, which is going to mean the frequency, we're going to get kind of this clean line. Well, not really clean, but not really noisy though, because it's 0 and it's lasting before going along the stroke. So along the stroke is like totally deleting everything. So let's use 4 and let's see how that goes. Okay, you can see the lines are pretty close one from another. Let's go to another slot so you can compare that. Period, let's go back to 10 and let's go back to render. And if we go back, you can see that's 4 period and that's 10. So you can see the lines are even longer. 4 shorter, 10 longer. So we already know this. If the parameter between 10 and 4 would be 5, which is the half of it, and of course we know that we need the period to be the double, so in our case it's going to be 20. I'm speaking all of this out loud so you can know how I usually work my stuff, because I tend to see that sometimes people say, Mr. Schiller, how do you know the value to put there? This is a formula practiced by mostly everyone in the industry, that if you get a round big number first, the next thing you want to do is to divide it by half. Why? Because you know that between that half of the entire number, it's going to be your optimal parameter. And from there on, you continue to divide by half every time. So in our case, let's not divide because we don't want to make this shorter. We want this to be larger. So now we know that the double of 20 would be 40, and therefore we will get a much longer line. Whoops, not 440. Let's F12. Okay, now we're getting longer lines, and we're kind of getting this Tsumi-E vibe. Look at that. Maybe we can do some of these things in the future with some Tsumi-E, which is a very Japanese traditional art technique. I really love it. Okay, so it's 40, and let's call down the amplitude, because right now, as we mentioned before, we're spending all of the $10 for the swimming pool into the amplitude. We don't want that. Maybe we want a third of that, so let's go with 3. F12, and now we should get a thinner line. Much better. Look at that. Thank you for holding all the way until this moment on the video, because I really want you to appreciate what you can do with freestyle. Okay, so remember, this noise is mixing with the base line that we have right here, which is a line of 1. And right now, after the noise, it's coming along the stroke. If I get this out of the way, we're gonna get this very tracy sketch. It's not bad, it's looking good, but we are looking to do anime. And in anime, you don't get this. Maybe if this was just for a drawing, or maybe if you pretend to, render out children's coloring books, this is the ideal method. So thank you very much for watching all the way until this point in the video. I really appreciate it that you are following along and getting more ideas. So if you have like cute characters, maybe this is the setting that you were looking for. Let me just open this up, and so you can see it in the line style, which we only have one, by the way. Here we go. We only have one line set. We have a crease angle of 137 degrees, and the thickness is set to outside. By the way, the base thickness is set to be outside. You can also variate this for the center or to be drawn in the inside of the line, and also relative to the camera, in which case you get this switch to be active. These other switches or these other buttons do not activate this slider, so just bear that in mind. Relative is relative to camera. So we're working with outside thickness. Next is the modifiers list that you have right here. There are many uses and appliances for this, but we're going to be using just calligraphy. So in our case, this is mixing with the one absolute line that we have in the general view. With a 65-degree orientation, we already mentioned this is from left to right, and the maximum thickness is 4. Next, we added a noise modifier using all of these parameters, and even asymmetric, because if you make this symmetric, then the noise is going to be the same for both sides, and we don't want that. So let's leave it there. And you can also vary the line thickness by varying this number right here. The seed will make a random shape. Okay, you can even animate all of these parameters, by the way. And you can also organize this by going up or down. You can also make them part of the render or not. If you switch this off, then you will not get it to render. But if you switch it on, it will get it to render. And right now, we're only seeing the calligraphy plus the noise. Now let's activate along the stroke and let's press render. Okay, this is too much maybe. Now, Mr. Schiller, I have noticed that all of the modifiers have this influence parameter. Yes, indeed. This is exactly the case where you would need an influence. What do you mean, Mr. Schiller? Do you mean that we can minimize the influence of that modifier in the modifier's line stack? Indeed, sir, and I'm glad you're paying attention. So let's go and dial this around 0.2. F12, and sure enough, our line looks much hand-drawn in this way. Now, if you're considering this is too thin, who is responsible for that? Let's remember that the along stroke is subtracting, okay? Basically deleting or rewriting or eating away the budget of the thickness 10 that we have right here. So what we need to do is to adjust this, make it not so thin right there. Maybe we want just a little bit thicker here and a little bit thinner there, and just a slight pinch right there. Okay, F12, and then this should work. Yep, we got most of the line there. Maybe we can continue to do more of the line, but for now this is everything I wanted to show you. Now we're going to pause this video and we're going to render this out to see how it looks. Before we get to the render part, please don't forget that the render passes right here that include the freestyle pass can also be rendered as a separate render pass. Right now it's being composited on top using the combine method. So that means that if you have color and materials, the freestyle pass will be multiplied on top. But if you only want this line, this outline, this black outline to be separated from your final image, you can render it out as a pass just by marking it here as a render pass. Down here on passes, freestyle as render pass. Okay? Don't forget about that, and then you can render, and that black outline will be the only thing that you will get on that image sequence. Okay, but we don't want that. I will not do that just yet. I can do that later because I don't want to composite. I want this already working. And let's go. Let's see how it turns out. I'm going to be pressing the render button. It's called render my big button. Render my big button. You can search on Google Blender my big render button add-on, and then you will get the download link there. Click here and that will switch from rendering a single keyframe to rendering an animation, and I hope that you have caught everything up until this point, because now it's a moment of truth. Let's see how it did. So before rendering, what you want to do is to check on your sampling, and in our case it's 64 pixels to render out. And also what you want to do is to check out here. I'm not going to be rendering a transparent animation. I wanted to have this white background specifically. And don't forget to mark this freestyle. It's super important. Color management, please make sure that you're using the standard and not filmic, because if you use filmic, oh boy, this is looking bad. But if you set it to standard, then you will get your values just as you expect. Okay, so this is looking pretty good. Let's render it out. Okay, so I took the time to render both animations, one at 24 frames and the right side at 12 frames. And as you can see, we have no stepped curves on the left animation, which is the normal interpolation that the computer makes, that Blender is doing just naturally. But on the right side, we are working with a special modifier add-on that I downloaded, and the description, you can find the link, and that's got stepped curves. Now let's see up close. Whenever we're working integrating 2D animation with 3D elements, there's a dissonance, there's a discord between frame rate and close details. So in this case, what we've done is to try to find the sweet spot between a 3D animation with regular interpolation plus the frame rate. Now you should know that there's a lot of discussion around the internet about how the animator and the compositor should match up all of these issues. So we have the final animation and it's looking good, but right now, since we have gotten this off the internet, this animation is pretty much interpolated as a smooth, and we don't want that. What we want is to step the animation. What I'm going to do now is to switch into pose mode. I'm going to select all of the bones that you see right here. I'm going to be switching on to a graph editor, right here. And then I'm going to press Control and Spacebar to maximize this area. Now there's a nifty add-on that I got this week, which is called Fcurve helper. I will leave the description and the link in the video description so you can follow it and download this amazing add-on. So once I have all of my bones selected, I'm going to come here into the helper tab, and as you can see, there is one huge advantage here in Blender using this specific add-on. In native Blender, you have to select each bone one by one, all of their curves, and then applying a step modifier. What this one does, this helper, Fcurve's helper modifier does, this panel, is to select all of the bones and automatically knows that it needs to select all of the internal animation curves that they have, and it can apply a single modifier in one single push. Let me show you how. So right now I'm going to add a modifier, and it's going to ask me which one. I'm going to activate it for all of the bones specifically, and I'm going to be adding it or modifying it. Yes. Which one is it going to be? It's going to be the step interpolation. And then it accesses the parameters for the step interpolation. So my step size is going to be for every 4 frames I want this curve to be stepped. And I guess that's it. No offset, and use the start frame, which is start 0. Yes. Restrict the frame range. No. Use influence. No. Just okay. And now it's done. Look at that. Every 4 frames my animation, it's going to move, and I'm going to be playing back both animations, the interpolated one plus this one right here, this step animation curve. Okay, so we want to apply this. Now how do we do that? Actually, if you play it back or if you render right now, it's going to be playing back as a step animation, so that's no problem. And I guess if you click one of the active or inactive buttons, I guess it's gonna do the trick. Anyways, so you can come here into keys and then bake the curve. I'm going to bake the curve, sure enough, and now my curve is baked. I can then delete or remove this helper. I don't need it anymore. Remove the modifiers, remove them all. Yes, I don't want anything. So if you come here to the modifiers, it's clean. So please bear in mind, this is a very handy trick that was shown to me on the Blender chat with the developers, because I needed to specifically bake one of the curves on one of my bones for another project, but only in a specific segment. And then he said, sure, apply the modifier, bake the curve, remove the modifier, and then unbake the curve. Let's repeat this one more time. If you want to have a modifier applied to your curve and then use your curve but edit it, you cannot do that in Blender. But there is a way to do it. So in this case, you will select the curve, you will activate, for example, let's say that you want to create some noise. Okay? And once the noise is active, you can then bake that curve. And once the curve is baked, remove the modifier. Once you do that, you will not be able to modify your curve because obviously it's baked. So you need to come here again and then unbake the curve, and that will make the apply modifier changes editable for you again. That's an awesome trick. Maybe you will not see it in action today, but it's a very awesome trick to know. Okay, so it's stepped. Now let's change the folder location and let's render again, and let's see how this will look compare side to side. I'm going to be clicking here on render animation once again. Let's go back to object mode. Render animation is active, and now we have the new path, which is character step. It's good. Let's render the animation. So this is a comparison, and it's looking pretty awesome. This is the result of the freestyle animation line. Look at that. It's marvelous. Okay, you may feel an expert now that you know all of the most used parameters in Blender Freestyle. So let's review the Rookie Curie Abby-chan model in this section. You might probably have seen the Rookie model Abby-chan. Now, if you go into edit mode, you're going to notice that her clothes are inverted in normals. And this creates this effect to receive the light in such a way that is different than if you have it inverted to the other side, which is this case that I have right here. As you may know, blue faces are facing always forward and red faces are facing inwards. So in this case, the eyes will not receive the light because these eyes are inverted. And the same thing happens with the clothes. Now this right here will render in this way. Let's switch back, Alt N, by flipping the normals, getting all these faces in red, and then F12 to render again and see the result. Do you see that? Now the dress on this part receives the light correctly, as intended. So even though you may find a model that has inverted faces like this, it is the artist's intention to have her receive the lights in this way. This model is very interesting to study because you can also check out the light direction that it has, but today we're going to concentrate on the freestyle rendering method that Rookie used for her. So let's explore that. We are going to come here into the passes, freestyle, and we can see she has different line sets for each part of her body. For the clothing, for the hair, for the body, and also for the shoes. And each one of those, as you can see, has a different collection to exclude or include the kind of line that she wants. For example, let's go to the hair, and if we go to the color tab of the hair, in the freestyle line, we're going to notice that it's got this blue color. Now if you click on the body, you're going to notice that the color for that, it's kind of a reddish tone that it has right here. And it doesn't have modifiers on the colors. If we explore on the thickness button and then we come here into the modifier section, we see that this model has a long stroke so that the line can be also stylized, and the profile that the curve is using will make in turn the line a little bit thicker and then thinner. But just like I already mentioned, somehow on Blender 293 this is not what is supposed to happen, or rather we are supposed to get a different kind of line using the curve profile. If you open this file on Blender 283, you will notice that this profile curve does indeed work to create a thin and thick outline for the model. But on Blender 293, this does not work. So as you can see, everything is the same thickness on the body, and this is not supposed to happen. So originally, if you open this file again on 283, you're going to see a very stylized line. But since we're working with Blender 293, we're going to stylize this line by using the previous modifiers that we presented. And before going into that section, let me please show you how the model looks with its own material and set up for the regular shading, as you can see right here. Like I mentioned before, today we're not going to be covering the normals, but let me just quickly say that whenever you model your shadows like this on the mesh, they are going to be correctly represented when you get light and shadow over here. But we're not going to cover that today, nor the things about the mouth. We're only interested in stylizing the freestyle settings. Okay, so let's play along with this and let's see how it turns. I previously did a poll to know if you were going to be interested in getting to know why Adi-chan has these colored lines and what do they mean. So we already explored that whenever you want sharp edges, you can crease your edges by obviously selecting your filter edge tool. You're going to select the part that you're interested in, and you're going to come here into item, and where it says mean crease, it's set all the way to 1. If this was set back to 0, you can see there is a line, and actually there is a material almost there that is in charge of creating the shadows. But you can make this even sharper when you crease this parameter. So that's why you see the red lines all over Abby Chan. Now, Mr. Schiller, what are these green lines? We previously mentioned on our previous example that all of these green lines are faces that are marked for Freestyle to omit or to take in acquaintance when it's rendering. So what Rookie did here was to select all of these faces from the model that she wants to exclude from Freestyle to draw anything over it, okay, to exclude what she's going to be selecting, in this case the mouth. And once you're on face filter select, you can press Ctrl F, come here to face data, and then mark Freestyle face. That way it's going to get this green color. Once this property has been applied to your model, now you can use the rest of the settings here, specifically to mark right here Facemarks as to be exclusive. So in the body collection, which has obviously the head, this model includes these faces over here and these faces over here, and they are set to be exclusive. Please read what it says right here. Facemarks, which means these green things, these green sections, are going to be exclusive. They are not going to be taken into calculation, into computation when the Freestyle pass render is happening. So let's say I do not want her eyebrows to be taken in acquaintance either. Or for example, this shadow that she has right here. Let me do that just really quick so you can see that it changes color. Right now it's set to mirror. That's why I'm selecting this side, and it's also selecting the other side. It's probably active. Yeah, it is active right here. Mirror. It's active. Also it has a data transfer because we mentioned already that she worked the normals in this model and it looks superb. But today we're concentrating on what these lines are, where did they come from, and how we are going to use them to our advantages. So again, it's selected using the face method, Ctrl F, face data, and then mark Freestyle face. Alt A to unselect everything, and now you can see that also these sections right here will not be taken into calculation for the final render. Now, as you may notice, here there is a line on the superior part of the eye. So if we select this using filter select edge right here, filter select edge, we're going to see that this, and this line or edge has a green color to it. So what does that mean? If you press Ctrl E, you can see that we have marked Freestyle Edge and then clear Freestyle Edge. So I'm going to clear it, okay? I've cleared the Freestyle Edge, and that means that in the body collection that we were previously watching right here, the edge mark, which is set to active, it's going to recognize edge marks like this one over here. Well, actually they have disappeared because it's mirror, right? So if I delete this one, the other one will go as well. So let's press F12 again, and now you can see that the edge marks for those specific segments have been removed. So what if we want them back? Again, we're working on the body collection, and body collection in edit mode. It's right here. And now that we have selected this 1, 2, 3, 4, Ctrl E, you can activate mark Freestyle Edge, and again it will turn green. So in addition, whenever you see red lines like this, those are created using the edge filter selection, but with the mean crease set to 1. If you set it to 0, the line disappears and you do not have a sharp edge. If you want sharp edges, make this mean crease a higher value, all the way to 1. So then you will get a normal that will go this way and another normal that will go this way. And this is the intended purpose for the artistic representation. Now, as you can see, there are other green edges over here. So that must tell you that all of these lines are also freestyle lines. Again, Rookie did an excellent job, an amazing, superb job here. But something weird is going on with Blender 293, and we cannot see the thickness and thinness of the line. So let's recreate that, and then we'll see how the render turns. And since we have already extensively covered how can you manipulate your own freestyle lines, I'm not going to be doing a long work here. I'm just going to be showing you that it is possible to have different results with the things that we have learned, specifically from the orientation and also for the threshold, the crease angle right here. So we want to detect more angles, and we are going to be using, I don't know, probably 140. Let's see how that goes. For the line, the freestyle line on this character. Now it's not looking that bad. Maybe we need to make this line a little bit thicker. Let's go for 2 and maximum value 2. Let's see how we get the result here. So we only want to stylize it just a tad, not too much, because like I mentioned before, it is something related to Blender 293. On Blender 282, this line would have come just perfectly. And you can see already that we have a thicker section here. Let me switch this to the white background so we can see it as it was intended, and that is with no transparency in this case, and directly multiplied against the background. So that's the background, the white background, and you can see the line, it's right there. It's looking pretty awesome. You can clearly see the thickness over here and then the thinness over here. Remember that we are applying this only for the face, or in this case the body, so that's why you can see that the lines here get really thin, probably too much. And over here they are doing just alright. They have this kind of strong combination. But in the face, it's definitely working as intended. Look at this side of the ear. It's also working as intended. So yeah, everything is amazing. The mouth probably needs some work too. Maybe we can do something about that. Let's see. Let's go back to the... And let's adjust this to 282 or 254 as a top line. And let's see. Maximum thickness for the calligraphy, it's 2. Yeah, I think this is what's going on. This is her original curve, and now I'm using it as a subtraction. Maybe just throw it into a mix. That way we can see the lines even better. So yeah, as you can see right here, the line is kind of thick, and it's mixing with the original curve that she provided in the model. But I think that for this one, I'm just going to go with the maximum value for that line, probably around 1.3, and this one 1.5. And the orientation, let's make it -75. And I think this is the end result, and it looks fantastic. It's great. It's awesome. Again, if you can take your time and separate each section, for example the hair, maybe we can also do that quickly. But you get the idea, and now you know what each of these lines in the Rookie model Abby-chan do. I don't think there's any more mysteries here to resolve. I think everything else that you see here, it's pretty much clear. So let's not forget, if you want to clear the faces, of course you're going to press 3 to filter select to face and select all of the faces you want to remove from the selection. Press Ctrl F, face data, and clear freestyle face. Okay, if you have any other further questions, I guess you can directly write to Rookie, but let me know your questions in the comment section down below. So I'm playing around with the hair, and now it's looking much better in the sense that the line is represented as intended. So let's see if we move this to if this is 0%, right now it's going from the bottom to the top. But we want to set it in inverse. That means the other way around. So we're going to use -90 and then F12. And sure enough, you can see a much better line in some of the places. Probably it's best if we go just from right to left. Let's see how that turns. Yeah, kind of looking good there, but the difference, let's switch it to mix. I think that was too much. What about 0? We're looking for the line orientation right now. Okay, that's looking good. That's looking good. That's looking good. So the max value, let's set it. Let's say 0.5 for the minimum, maximum 1.5, and this should be it. Yep. Let's bring this down just at that. Now, if you like the parameters, like we mentioned before, you can bring this down for the influence so that the line, the freestyle line, will be mixed together. I guess that was too much still. Let's go 1.1, and I guess that will be it. Yep, that's it. Look at that. I see. They're kind of uniform. Yeah, they're uniform. Definitely we need more influence, and at least some degree of variation. Let's go for 15 positive so that we can see the line thickness over this side, and yeah, thinner over this side. So yeah, you can continue to do this for the entire model, the entire clothes. So I'll stop right here because it's looking much better now. Regarding the line, of course, this model was beautiful from the beginning to start with. So there you have it. Now you know what each of those line colors do inside the 3D model for Abby Chan and its freestyle lines. Hey, did you know I used to do live training for CG artists before the pandemic? I honestly miss the opportunity to see your work, answer your questions live about grease pencil, sculpting, and stylized shaders. So it was an easy choice to do when Wingfox reached out to me and asked me to team up with them to continue bringing you the update to one of the most requested courses I've done, the stylized 2D toon shader in Blender. This is the updated Guilty Gear stylized shader course in Blender from Gumroad, with over 2 hours of new content made for the latest Blender version. This you can get at Wingfox. A lot of people ask me to get all of the course parts in one single download, all of the exercises, work files, and animation files for our model Fixie, which was custom designed for you to practice all of the techniques shown in the course. Now here's the good news. Depending on the features Blender 3 rolls out after December 2021, we're going to be included part 5 and part 6 to this stylized 2D training course. If you're new to the channel, my name is Pierre Schiller and I am a 3D animator and VFX compositor with a lot of years of experience doing 3D animation. But I really like that 2D stylized look, and I have been a Softimage user for quite a long time, so I decided to port all of these methods into Blender, which has a real-time viewport. If you would like to get more details about the updated information in this course, there is an extensive blog post where you can read all of the details of what this will mean for all of the patrons, all of the subscribers, and all of the other social channels that I constantly post on to share this kind of classes and this kind of lessons for you to learn. So in the long run, what it's going to happen in 2022, God willing, is that the longer term courses are going to be sent to Wingfox and the shorter term courses are going to be still used on Gumroad. That means anything below 1 hour or maybe below 30 minutes, it's going to go to Gumroad, while all of the content that surpasses 4 hours plus, it's going to go to Wingfox. Okay, but it all depends on what your feedback is. So if you want to see something specifically on Gumroad, you can ask me in the comment section down below or in the post itself. Like if you come down here, you share your thoughts here, I will greatly appreciate it. And let's not forget that everything I create, it's based on the feedback that you give me. So it is very important that if you have any new thoughts or any observations about the course or the development or the method, I will greatly appreciate it if you let me know your thoughts. So thank you very much. This has been an amazing live stream class presentation. I think I'll be trying this format more often. I really like it to interact this way, so that you can benefit in real time with your questions along the way. Thank you so much and have a great weekend. If this is the first time visiting my channel, maybe you'd like to try Blender. Try Blender. Blender is powerful and beyond industry compatible.